Hi, I'm Jimmy Colefax, and this is The Story. Our guest today is Chloe Hayden, who's a young woman with Asperger syndrome, and she's also an advocate for young people diagnosed with Autism Spectrum Disorder. Also joining us today via the telephone from her office in Geelong is Chloe's mother, Sarah, who's a social worker specialising in autism. Now, here's more of Chloe's story.
Getting back to Chloe's growing up with Asperger's, but obviously you didn't know about it at first. Did you notice anything was a bit different?
I guess on reflection now, I can, as an experienced parent and also obviously a social worker that works with lots of families with children on the autism spectrum, I can look at it now and go, wow, how did I miss that? The only thing that makes me feel better about that is my own father is a doctor and my mum is a nurse, and even neither of them ever thought anything was different or suggested it. So I guess one of the things that's, especially girls on the spectrum, it is not uncommon for them to be diagnosed much later because they are very hard to diagnose, and they can be very clever at what we call masking the symptoms of autism. And, particularly in the Aspergers or, level 1/ higher functioning children with autism, it can be quite difficult. But yes, looking back now, as I said, I was a fairly young mum. I was told that I possibly wouldn't have children. I had suffered severe endometriosis for many years, and my doctor at the time had said, you're married, I would be trying to have a child if you can while you're young, because the older you get, the less likely you're going to be. And we were very blessed that we had Chloe, straight away. 22 years ago, we were relatively young parents in our early 20s, no previous experience of children. And because she was our first child, we had, I guess, nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, right.
She was an incredibly sensitive little girl. As I think I said earlier, we used to call her our quirky genius. She was an incredibly intelligent but also very, very sensitive little girl.
When you say sensitive like emotionally, or how sensitive?
Everything. Sensitive emotionally.
All of the above.
Physically. So, yeah, she would, I guess, looking right back, even as a very, very young baby, if I put any kind of clothing on her that she didn't like, she would scream and try and rip it off. She was incredibly sensitive to certain fabrics, to tags, to lights, to sounds, to smells. I used to just think she was a fussy baby. She would cry a lot. She wouldn't sleep unless she was either on myself or my husband. She was literally attached to us 24/7. So we co-slept with her, but it wasn't enough for her just to be in between us. She had to be on top of us and then something on top of her. She sort of needed to have deep pressure with us sort of arms wrapped around her, almost like we used to call her a little koala bear, because she'd sort of be wrapped around you and you'd have to be wrapped around her, and if you took your arms off her, she'd start screaming. She was incredibly clingy. She was very emotional, but she was also highly intelligent, where she would very early on read encyclopedias and fact books and liked to let people know about all of the facts of the world. And she really didn't care whether you were interested or not. She was going to share that knowledge with
changed.
You. She was quite unable to read social cues, and it really wasn't bothered at all whether you were engaging in conversation with her. She would just sit there and reel off these facts that she thought that you would find as remarkable as she did. And she really wasn't bothered whether you were engaging in any kind of conversation. She would just continue on. And to be honest, to an extent, that she's still exactly like that now.
but seriously, that is one of the characteristics of
Absolutely.
Asperger's.
Looking back now, yes.
Is not getting social cues?
Exactly right. I often laugh now because obviously in my role I'm often speaking to families about this exact thing, and now I'm always looking at sort of I guess what you call the checklist of, autism, especially in young girls, and now I sit there and I look at it and I go tick, 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 like every single thing, of course, Chloe had. But I guess because I really didn't know, I'll be honest with you, the only experience of autism that I had ever had was watching the movie Rain Man. You would have remembered Dustin
of course,
Hoffman and Tom Cruise, and he was autistic, and to me that's what autism was, so I didn't know anything about it. It wouldn't have even occurred to me that there was anything different about our girl, or certainly not autism. So it had never come across my personal radar, and I certainly had no knowledge of it whatsoever. But yes, she was certainly a very fussy little child, and I guess it wasn't until a few years later that her younger sister, who's 4 years younger and incredibly neurotypical, in other words, not on the spectrum, and an incredibly social, outgoing, resilient little girl, that I started to realise how vastly different Chloe was to her.
Yeah. Now, Chloe, just growing up, Did you feel that you were different, or how did you kind of know that, hey, I'm not like the other people?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think growing up my entire life, I've always felt different. I always felt like the odd one out. Like at school in particular, I guess, was the main one, because all the kids there like acted the same and did the same things and liked the same things and just kind of worked in the same way.
But they weren't reading the encyclopedia.
Oh no, that's exactly it. See, I was the weirdo, and like all these kids were the same. And growing up, like in primary school, that's kind of okay. Like in primary school, you're kind of allowed to be yourself. You're kind of allowed to be a little bit quirky, a little bit weird, a little bit individual. High school in particular, start of year 7 was when I really felt it, because like Mum said, we moved to Portland when I was in year 7, and that was a very beachy town. I went to the first high school I went to was a private high school where on the beach, and they were all surfers, and all of the girls had tan skin and blue eyes and long blonde hair, and all like beautiful Barbie dolls, and I was none of that. And they all liked the same things. They're all like into boys and magazines and jewelry and makeup and clothes, and I just wanted to hang out with my horses and care about none of that. I realized that, okay, I'm nothing like any of these people. And at the start, I was kind of like, oh, you know, that's okay, because I had a home unit, I had a family unit, I had people who I knew loved me for who I was. But it starts to wear on you after some time. And I think even the strongest people are eventually going to be like, I don't fit in, so what's the point? And I went through a lot of time where I had severe depression and anxiety, and I felt like I didn't need to be here anymore, just because I felt that the world that I was in wasn't created for someone like me.
So, Sarah, at this point, do you have any idea what is going on inside of your daughter? Tell us what was happening then for you too.
Eric, we didn't. I mean, she was approaching being a teenager. Things were just getting worse by the day. It didn't matter what we were doing, where we were searching. It just seemed that things were getting darker and darker, and we just knew that something was going on, but we had absolutely no idea what it was.
Okay, we're going to stop it right there because we've run out of time for this first conversation with Chloe Hayden and her mother, Sarah. At this point, we're hearing that she's undiagnosed and has no idea what's going on, and things are getting very bad in her life. But things get much better when she gets diagnosed, and she is now helping others. So is it okay if we have Chloe and Sarah have you both back for part 2 of this conversation? Will that be all right?
Absolutely.
We would love to be back again. Thank you.
Well, that was part 1 of Eric Scatterbo's conversation with Chloe Hayden and her mother, Sarah. We invite you to join us again next time for part 2 of Chloe's amazing story. Chloe's a young woman with Asperger's syndrome who's a guest speaker at many schools and events across Australia as an advocate for young people diagnosed with Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD. To learn more about Chloe, you can visit her website, princessaspian.com. That's Princess Aspien, ASPIEN.com. Finally, I want to end today with this verse from the book of Psalms that's a good reminder of how we are all precious in God's sight. It comes from Psalm chapter 139. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Well, until next time, when we'll hear more of Chloe's inspiring story, I'm Jimmy Colefax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
I started to see that, you know, I was different, but I knew that there were other people out there that were different too. And I knew that I wasn't the only one. So I saw no one was being a voice for those people. No one was out there. No one was talking to kids like me saying, hey, this is who you are and that's okay. And I realized that no one else was doing it, so maybe it was my job to do it.
Chloe Hayden grew up feeling that she was somehow different and didn't fit in. She was eventually diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and has gone on to become an advocate for young people diagnosed with Autism Spectrum Disorder. We'll hear more of Chloe's amazing story next time.
The Story. Just another way Vision is connecting faith to life.